Hello, my name is Dr Sarah Ashbridge and I'm a Research Fellow for Defence and Society in the Military Sciences team here at RUSI. Today we're going to talk about something which has been a popular topic of conversation on social media, which is what is happening to the huge numbers of Russian dead remaining on the battlefield in Ukraine. You may have read my recent commentary, which reflects upon the deployment of mobile crematoria from Russia into Ukraine. There's been lots of conversation about this, but we've had very little information out since. The deployment of the crematoria raised a number of concerns, such as the information that Russian families would receive about their sons, but also the possibility that Ukrainian soldiers could be cremated in an effort to hide evidence of war crimes. We've had very little information, as I mentioned, about the crematoria, their location and their use, and it's likely that the Russian forces do not have enough fuel to make use of the crematoria, given the pressures on their logistic supply chain. More recently, Russia has deployed chilling facilities, which can hold multiple bodies at any point. And this suggests that Russia has begun to move bodies away from the front line for burial or cremation at a different location. It remains unclear if this information has been shared or communicated with Russian families and what information that they have about their loved ones. There are reports that the chill facilities have been used to transport the remains of Russian soldiers into neighbouring countries, but little is known about what has happened to their bodies once this evacuation has been completed. They may be returned to their families in Russia, buried within a mass grave, or cremated. One of the reasons that we have so little information about both the crematoria and the chilling facilities seems to be the fact that most of the information that we're getting is coming through on social media. This means that we have to take the information that we're getting with a pinch of salt until it's verified, because much of it may be speculative or may be part of information campaigns from either side. Another concern is the sharing of photographs which depict images of human remains and also of prisoners of wars, because the sharing of these pictures is actually a breach of the Geneva Convention, which denies dignity to the dead and risks the potential that prisoners of war may be identified. This hasn't stopped those photos being shared, but it's important for us to acknowledge that this is in fact a breach of the convention. Mass graves have been used by almost all national armies for hundreds of years, the British Army included. Chapter 1 of the Geneva Convention dictates that armed forces are responsible for conducting a search of the remains of their own dead along with the enemy dead, in accordance with Article 3 of Chapter 1. All are required to forward any identifying objects or papers through the relevant national or international channels prior to the burial or cremation of any dead. And this is in accordance with Article 4 of Chapter 1. It remains unclear if these actions have been taking place consistently, and it's possible that we may not gain full clarity until the conclusion of the war. Now, mass graves may seem scandalous to civilians such as myself, but they are in fact a traditional form of battlefield burial across the British forces and most of the international community. That is not to say that a mass grave will remain the final resting place of anyone buried within them. It is likely that the mass graves will be reconcentrated into national cemeteries at a later point. The purpose of mass graves is to provide a rapid burial in order to maintain the dignity of the dead and the sanitation of the battlefield, protecting living soldiers from infection and disease. It has been reported this week that around 15,000 Russian soldiers have now been killed, though there are huge discrepancies between the information which is reported by Ukraine and by Russia. There are also significant numbers of Ukrainian dead, and not all have yet been removed from civilian areas. Now, this is likely because there is not enough manpower on either side to evacuate the dead, given the concentration of forces on the front line. Now, the bodies of the dead will decompose at different rates depending on the surrounding temperatures and conditions where they lie. And processes will speed up as temperatures continue to rise. Now, it remains unclear when the war may conclude and how many bodies will need to be recovered from Ukraine upon its conclusion. But given the issues with decomposition, it's likely that professionals with a forensic skill set will be required to ensure that the bodies are removed in a sanitary manner, whilst also maintaining as much dignity as possible for the dead. It feels likely that this will require an international response from the private sector, given the pressures on the Ukrainian infrastructure and the Ukrainian armed forces. And it feels like the best response may involve emergency response services working alongside armed forces from the international community to, first of all, remove and secondly, reconcentrate the dead into new cemeteries, which may be established following the conclusion of the war. There are those who may ask what will be the role of the War Graves Commission in the response to the Ukrainian and Russian dead on the battlefield. However, it's important to acknowledge that the War Graves Commission was set up to commemorate the dead of the First and Second World Wars only, and they are not responsible for responding to contemporary deaths. Despite this, there is a precedent for breakaway units of the Red Cross who have deployed to the Western Front for continuing with this work to remove the dead, and also for engaging with families. And there are units, including the mobile unit, which was led by Sir Fabian Ware, the founder of the War Graves Commission, for conducting this work, for leading on graves registration work, and also for becoming incorporated into a national army. And this was the foundation of the War Graves Commission back in the First World War. So this could perhaps inform the response that national armies would like to take, or perhaps the international community might like to take. It's possible that the Red Cross may lead these works, but it's yet to be confirmed who will be best placed to coordinate the response required. If the figure of 15,000 Russian dead is true, this would mean that Russia has suffered more heavy losses than back in the Chechnya wars. In fact, there are reports that Chechen soldiers have already begun to return home following heavy losses on the battlefield. In 2013, Russia opened its first federal military memorial cemetery, with the inaugural burial taking place on the 21st of June 2013. The cemetery is designed to hold up to 40,000 soldiers, and if the war in Ukraine continues even for a short number of months, it's potential that the cemetery will become overwhelmed by the dead. Moving forward, both Russia and Ukraine will need to consider where the bodies of those who were recovered from the battlefield will be placed. It feels likely that both countries will need to establish new national cemeteries to mark the conclusion of the war and to provide a respectful resting place for those who lost their lives in service of their country. For those who don't know me and my work, my background is in forensic archaeology. So this is a situation that I'm going to continue to monitor over the coming weeks, along with a number of forensic professionals. You can follow up on my work within the commentary section on the RUSI website, and more information will be revealed through other publications in due course. For those who'd like to stay on top of the conversation in real time, I'd recommend signing up for a Twitter account or following the situation on Telegram, as that's where we're getting through the most information. Though please do remember that not all information published is verified. If you work for an organisation that is beginning to plan for what their response to the dead may be, please do feel free to reach out, because I would be very grateful to hear more about what the response may be and the role of RUSI and other forensic organisations in this response. You can find my contact details within my staff page on the RUSI website,